Hi everyone, welcome to the Indulgent Bibliophile January book chat. Today we're joined by the author of the book we read, Veronique Tadjo, and I'm very excited for all of us to chat with her. Her discussion at Ake Festival was just after I heard that they haven't put it up on the Ake Festival YouTube page yet, but by the end of this week, it will definitely be up for more people to watch it. But after that chat, I went to read the book immediately, and it was such. I mean, it's I loved the way she wrote about such a traumatic event, and I think what struck me the most and why I had to get more of us to read this book is because after the Ebola crisis, there has been COVID, and even though we say it's easier to deal with traumatic events through fiction, I feel like some people still forget. So books like the more we have books like this out there, maybe the younger generations or those of us still here will find a way to make things work because COVID wasn't new. There was 1920. I mean, we in this book club we've read enough like two books based that were inspired by the Spanish flu in 1920, but COVID happened and everybody was acting brand new. But I really appreciated how this book was able to take such a traumatic event and turn it into something where we are able to process the pain, the loss, and the hurt. Because it's so easy when you get so many news about bad things happening, it becomes so abstract, like, oh, 500 people died in the Ebola crisis. But when you read like perspectives from like 14 different perspectives, it puts it in, it's like, whoa, this really happened to us, especially those of us who are in West Africa that we saw things happening and we only have our own perspectives. So it was nice to read different perspectives from different parts of West Africa. So thank you, Veronique, for joining us. Today's session is not like a book chat. We're going to be chatting with the author and sharing our thoughts and opinions and how we were able to interact with the book. Yeah. So I want to ask before I ask the author about what inspired the title, like I usually do, I want to ask those of us here, um, how did you feel about the title of this book, In the Company of Men? Did you find it fitting when you finished reading the book? Did you have this aha moment like, okay, that kind of makes sense? Okay, Omolola, your hand is up. We'll start with you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Veronique, for joining us. So there, I forget what page it's on. I forgot to flag it, but there is title spotting in the book, and the Company of Men is mentioned. And I didn't come to the aha moment then, but I understand it. And it brings me back to things I say about the way we report stories out of Africa, out of West Africa. The human interest is lost. And I believe that that's what the title was giving to this book. You're in the company of men, in the company of people. I'm thinking men is loose term for people. And this was a people story. And I always say that the reason you see a lot of Nigerians do this on social media, we stand with things that are happening in the US because they can see people, they've been told stories about these people and they can relate with those people, but we don't get that. When even our own news, you just hear that there was a bombing in the north, but you know nothing about these people. They just, as you said, give statistics. So that was what that title meant, for me. And I was living in Nigeria at the time, the last Ebola crisis that when it came to Nigeria took the life of Dr. Adadevo. And so yes, that for me was what the title meant. And I'll leave my comments on the rest till another time.
Okay. Bukola?
Yeah, I echo what Omolola said, but also for me, I love title spotting and I like going through and underlining the title when I spot it. But not long into the book, I got what the title meant and the way I interpreted it. And Veronique, thank you for joining us. And you might have a completely different interpretation, but the way I interpreted it was how human beings, and as Omolola said, men being a general term for all human race, but how human beings deal with nature and how we deal with ourselves and all of that. So especially when the tree was narrating, when the bat was narrating, when non-human beings were narrating, I think they kind of blamed the human, even when Ebola itself was narrating, Ebola was like, I was there, the bats were there. We human beings are the ones that went to disrupt it. And even when it came in, we didn't look out for each other like we should have. So I think in the company of men, I see it like nature and other non-human beings looking at us and thinking they're surrounded by human beings and reflecting on what human beings do to nature. As I said, I might be wrong, but that was my interpretation. But I didn't think the title was very different from the book. I read the book and I was like, okay, at least I can understand why it's this title. And I loved it, by the way. I love the book. Very sad, but very important. And I really loved it.
Thank you. So Veronique, what inspired the title of this book, In the Company of Men?
Coming, I don't see myself, so is that all right? I'm okay. You can see
Yes.
me?
No, we can't see you actually.
Start now.
No, it's showing a dark screen.
Which is very strange. I don't know why.
Okay, do you want to leave the chat and then join again?
Maybe. Yeah. Sorry about that. Should I do that?
Okay. Yes, please.
Okay.
God, somebody's frying akara in my street. Shit.
Isn't that a Saturday morning activity? As akara
You
changed
get
to some...
like those akara
I'm
in
so
the
old
evening of
school.
Sunday.
I'm so old school.
God help us. Like the wind is like wafting into. Enemies.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you, but it's still not showing your face. It's showing that camera with a slash.
You might have the camera thing on your laptop clicked. So some laptops have this cancel camera button.
Okay. It's strange because I see you all, but how strange. I must say that is odd because it has not happened to me before. What can I say?
I mean, if you request that she turn on her video, maybe something will pop up, making it easier.
It actually doesn't have that option. I'm checking. It doesn't have request video.
Hi. So usually, some laptops have like a sliding thing across the camera. So she might just need to slide, to open it so that we can see.
Like slide, not click.
Yes, slide, like where the camera button is.
Oh, okay.
Like the actual camera on the laptop screen.
Okay, let me try something. It's really silly. I'm sorry, it's not happening.
Oh,
I have no idea. I see you all.
I actually have no idea what else it could be.
I see you all, no problem, but
Mm.
Video settings. What I have right now is mirror my video, touch up my parents, adjust for light, video, audio.
Okay. On top of that, do you have your what is it showing on that camera? Is it original ratio, HD, HP cam, or I don't know if you're using a Windows.
It's saying me HD.
HP webcam.
HD, but it says mirror my video. Maybe that's the problem.
No, I also have mirror my video on mine. So I just opened video settings on mine. So I know. I also have mirror. I also have mirror my video clicked on mine at the moment. So it can't be that.
Very strange, because I really don't understand. Share screen? No.
Women instead. Okay.
Very strange. I can see the camera is
it showing a light? Yes, it's showing a cross on the camera. Is it showing a light on your webcam on the laptop? Do you have a light on there?
Yes, but there's something red as well. There's two.
If it's red, that means it's on, right? Like if you're showing a light beside the camera, it means it's on.
Yeah. So I really, it beats me. I'm so sorry. It really beats me. I don't understand what's going on. In fact, I was like ready to go, so I don't understand. It beats me. I have start video and I try, but it's just giving me. I say, yeah, I try start video, but it's not happening.
It's not showing.
So maybe we should do it without looking at me.
Yeah, it's okay. Some people are saying it could be a Zoom update thing, but yeah, that's a very long process.
Yeah, really sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, guys, we're good to continue.
We're glad we don't see you, but yeah, it's great to hear your voice, and I think we're happy to have you any way that you can show up.
Okay. Yeah. So that's fine. Let's not trouble ourselves over computer issues. Sometimes these computers know when you're stressed and they just add to the stress. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll just continue then.
Yes. So regarding the title, I think I'm very happy with Omolola and Bukola's interpretations, because my idea was really to talk about human beings and the way they behave with nature and animals in general. So it was, in fact, it's talking about the gaze that animals and even nature could put on human beings' behavior. That's exactly that. Human beings are part of nature and not above nature, because for too long, I think that human beings all over the world, not quite so much in ancient times or in traditional societies, but today, in any case, human beings are see themselves as the conqueror of
Yes.
nature, the dominators of nature. And I think it has been a great disservice to
I blame the Bible.
balance of the world, and that's why we are in such a predicament at the moment. So yeah, it is definitely this idea. It's a people's story. Yet, yes, it's set in Africa, but it's larger than that. It's much larger than that. And I always believe that in the authenticity of a story is that if you want to tell a story, you need to ground it as much as possible in the context of that story. And then the story suddenly speaks to everybody. That is the main paradox, is that the more you ground it in the place where it happened, the more it takes a universal dimension. So that's the way I see it, because then everybody everywhere somehow recognizes themselves.
Okay. So to the rest of the house, this book is very unique in its style, narrative style. What did we think of the writing style and the content structure of the book, how it was told? Does anybody want to speak to that? Yes. Do I see hands? Okay. Hi, Nikki. Okay, your hand is up, so you can go.
Oh, okay. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Oh, thanks. It's so great to be here finally. Yeah, so this was a really interesting book to read. I think it's one that I didn't have any expectations about going into. So it's interesting to see how it was sort of layered, as Veronique has said, as the interconnectedness of like nature, and humans are part of nature, not a part of it. And sort of having these different voices and perspectives coming, and how each voice is so particular or connected. And I think when you hear from like the tree or the bat, they have this voice that connects you to sort of this idea of an ancient wisdom versus humans who are very present wisdom, because we're evolving in according to our present states, where these other creatures have existed, like, and it's all this sense that they pre-exist us. And you feel that in the voices, the way they're sort of framed, that there is this idea of something that has come before, and there's something that's come into a system that already exists, and that's humans. We're always coming into systems that exist, but we center ourselves as though we are sort of, the arbiters of knowledge in that space. And I think, in the Company of Men does a really good job of separating, what is rooted in, I guess, the fabric of nature versus what is sort of evolving into nature. And so it was just really, that layeredness was really interesting to see, and see it executed, and being able to hear these voices as very separate things, but connected because of, the commonality of the virus, but commonality of our presence on this earth. So the voicing, I think, was really, really beautifully done in this. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Bukola?
Yes, I love the writing, and I love that that they're all different points of views, and I had my favorites. I love the fact that, everything was covered. There was, I can't even think of anything that wasn't covered. And one of the things I liked about it is also that in the middle of war, in the middle of loss and grief, there is always love. So I liked the story of the fiancé, and exchanging love through words when he couldn't be there with her and things like that. I really, really liked that. I liked hearing from the perspective of the young and the old, hearing from the perspective of a bat, of the tree and all of that. And an author I really, really love, Elif Shafak, the first book of hers I read was The Island of Missing Trees, and I was a bit thrown back by a tree narrating. And at the beginning, I thought I didn't like it, but by the end of that, I loved the book. And then reading this, I was like, right from the beginning, I loved the tree narrative straight from the beginning. So I don't know if that's because I'd read another one before or whatever, but it was really good to hear from the perspective of a tree, because you have that wisdom, the fact that they're there, all seeing, all knowing, more like, and they're there for decades and decades, so they know a lot more than we human beings know. So I really love the writing style. And I love the translation must have been really good as well, because sometimes when you have books in translation, I don't know if you lose part of it, but I think the fact that I really love the writing style of this. I have to give something to the author and the translator for working together to translate it from French into English, because I think that was done really well.
Okay, okay. Blessing. Blessing, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I loved the writing style. At first, when I saw from the blurb that the book was about Ebola, I was like, wow, Ebola, New Year, we're starting with reading something about Ebola.
Sorry.
What am I doing? But then when I read it, I understood why. It was very well written, and I liked that I had like various perspectives, just like Bukola said, various perspectives of, basically, I think it covers a fair minimum of every single type of person that could have been affected by Ebola, both the victim, not victims, the patients, like the people who died from it, the people who recovered, their loved ones, the fear, and all of that. Like, I think it was like the second chapter or so, or the third chapter, where some people, the kids were sick, and the mother, the health worker came and said, don't touch your children. That part was it was so deep, because it was like, how can you be watching your child die or your family member die, and you can't do anything? So, and then the poet, that one was also like really deep. In fact, all of them were deep. The health workers, the person that was burying the dead bodies, it was really very moving. It moved me really. And then I loved how she connected it with like our ancestors and nature and the herbalists, like the traditional healers that we have, because most of the time people are always talking about like Western medicine when it comes to things that are going on, but then they leave out the traditional healers and the herbalists and all of that. I love the fact that they were represented in the book. And the part where she was talking about how we all had to come, when the virus was talking, and it said human beings, at the end of the day, it wasn't money, it wasn't any other thing but unity. That was what ended up defeating the virus. And then it made me think about Corona as well, how it was also like everybody behaving themselves that led to the reduction in the prevalence of the virus and all of that. So it was a really good read. I loved the writing style. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right. Before we go deep into like the different perspectives, I want to pick something out from what Bukola said about the translation. So Veronique, this book was originally published in 2017 in French, and then we have it in 2021. I want you to talk a little bit about how the translation work was done, because you did this with a translator. It wasn't just like, it wasn't given off to another person. Like when you were working on the translation, were there perspectives that might have changed, or ideas or some text that might have changed from the original text, especially with the no, I don't want to say like context of coronavirus, but like looking at the way coronavirus also affected us after you have written about the Ebola epidemic. Did you find yourself making any adjustments? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, I was. In fact, I was very, very lucky with the translation because John Cullen is a very good translator, very gifted translator, and he was also very open. So we had a lot of conversations, and it was quite a challenge because COVID was happening. As you said earlier, the book was originally in French, and it was published in 2017. So there was no idea of COVID. We didn't know that was coming. So when we were working on the translation in the context of a pandemic and in the context of COVID-19, we had to be very careful not to translate it as, if you want, a coronavirus story. That wasn't it. So what we didn't realize, because it was happening to us in real time, was the fact that a lot of vocabulary, a lot of the words that we used during the coronavirus pandemics were typical of that period. So you didn't want to use that type of vocabulary in the Ebola story, because not only was it not the same context, but it was also not the same thing, the same battle, the same challenges. So yeah, you had to be very careful in that sense. But it came after a lot of discussion, and the text also had a prior translation that was like a kind of a draft. So it went through different changes.
Okay. Sorry, is there, this is just a random question I'm throwing out to everybody in the house. Has anybody seen a baobab tree in real life? Anybody? Wow, city girls in the house. Okay, Nikki.
I've seen a baobab tree, and it's majestic. Really.
Fantastic. I had to watch a video on YouTube where there was a, what's it called? What's the flying camera thing? A drone. Yes, a drone. So I had to watch a video of that just to, like, I wanted to put a face to the voice. Does that make sense? I wanted to put a face to the voice when I was listening to that particular perspective. And my goodness, it sounded like it would be booming.
It's a beautiful tree, yeah? It's a wonderful tree. And so tall and majestic and mythical as well. Because and what is interesting is what I learned in the process of writing the book is that the tree also, the baobab tree also exists in Australia, for example, in Madagascar, and in other countries, and they don't have the same shape. But the idea of a baobab tree for me is something that make you respect nature even more, because they're like tree gods. They are the most magical trees. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Sorry, I was driving, so I didn't want to. But yes, I've seen one. My grandma has one in her house.
How big is her house? God damn, how big is her house?
It's very big.
Yes.
And I think there's one somewhere behind ours too, but I'm not sure if it's a baobab. Let me go there now and I'll turn on my camera. And I was looking I kept saying I need to go and take a picture of my book with the tree to post it online, but I didn't get to. But let me confirm if the one behind our house is a baobab and then show you guys for the ones that haven't seen it before.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
There are no baobabs in Nigeria, for example, or in Sudan?
It's mostly, yes, it's mostly in northern Nigeria. Yes, someone just said.
Yes.
It's northern Nigeria.
I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. All right. Yeah.
Oh, Elizabeth, your hand is up.
Yes, Botany speaking.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, so yeah, the baobabs in Nigeria. I've seen one once in Obudu, Cross River State.
Okay.
Northern Cross River, but they're all different species. So the one you see here is quite different from the one I saw in Bauchi, for example, and very, very different from the ones I saw in Madagascar. So
yeah.
Okay. Ava is saying there are baobabs on the East African coast too. Well, I guess
Wait, so you see?
she's the Beyonce of trees.
Yes, she is. Yeah, definitely the rock star of trees. Yes.
Okay. So I feel like everybody is meaning to enter the different perspectives, the different POVs in the book a little bit more. I know some people are saying a lot of the perspective. They can't think of any other perspective that could have been popped up, but I had a list that I want
Sorry
to share.
to stop you guys. I think this is a different one.
That's Slim. That
No,
does
that's not a baobab tree. I
not,
don't think so.
that is definitely not. That's slim. That's a slim tree.
It's a baobab tree.
Who said so?
Is it? Who said it?
Yes. See the fruit dropping because of the way the fruit drops.
Oh,
well.
So they could be this
You have
tiny.
to.
Interesting.
And look at the trunk of the tree.
What this trunk looks?
It's not in our house. It's a different house.
Okay, it's outside your house. I was just looking at the branches.
So
They do look sturdy though.
it's behind.
I guess this is
And
the different species.
it doesn't
from
have
the one that
leaves at this time of the year.
Okay.
Of course, makes sense. Hamatan and all. Okay.
So this
Thank
is
you.
one.
Is that Farida? I'm seeing Fatima, but is that Farida?
No,
or Fatima?
it's Fatima.
Fatima, you sound like Farida.
Yeah.
Farida here.
Really? I
Yes.
joined the book club this year.
Okay, I almost thought it was Farida who was using someone's phone. Okay.
So yeah, that will make a perfect picture.
Okay. Yes,
Oh, wow.
please
Okay,
take that
okay.
picture and post it online. Please. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you too.
Okay. So who can you mute your mic? Okay. All right. So I had a mini list of more perspectives. I know this book should not have a book two because that would be becoming trauma porn, as they say. But I had a fantasy list for more, what's it called? More perspectives, if you will. I wanted to hear from sanitary workers, people who sweep the road, and all that. Women in the market who were selling food. I'd love to hear from press people, because the press was going crazy then. And then students and teachers, they had to stop. There was a Korean spray already. Homeless people, aviation staff. What else? Yeah, that was my mini list. So I'm sure if I sit down, there are still more perspectives that I wanted. So I'm throwing this question to the house. Bookstagrammers.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, in fact, my wish has always been that people, readers, would add their own perspective. That was my idea, because I could have gone on and on and on, because there were so many people involved in the fight against Ebola that it was a countless number of people. So, for example, I wish I had been able to talk about the people who took the phone calls. There was a hotline.
Oh,
yeah. Do you imagine what they must have felt, receiving all those calls? And the calls were very often dramatic, because there was a very little, very weak infrastructure, so that people would call and say, look, my parents, for example, are sick, what should I do? And the ambulance would not come, or would come, 2 days later, and then that person who called was then contaminated. So I thought of these people who took on the telephone conversations, telephone calls, and they were very young usually, they were either volunteers or very young. And you talked about the students. They were very often students, who accepted to kind of come in and work. So that was quite, I wish I had done it. But after a while, I thought, look, I can't,
There's only
do
so
too
much. Yes.
Yeah, because I don't want to lose the readers, because they'll be crushed by all the information. So I had to stop at some point. But my wish has always been, look, if you're interested in the story, you can find out about all the other people who were involved.
Mm. Okay. So like, to the rest of the house, which perspective in the book struck with you the most? And if were there other perspectives that you'd have wanted to hear from? Who wants to go first? Am I seeing any hand? Is it network, or you are just not raising your hand? Okay. All right. Bola. Oh, welcome to your first book club. Hi, Bola.
Hello, Amin. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the discussion so far. So one of the perspectives I really enjoyed was the baobab tree perspective, and also the researcher, because they filled me with so much hope around, when humans come together, the power of humanity, when we're trying to overcome all the struggles that come because we don't mind our business and just try to interfere with nature. So I really liked their perspective. Like you, I would have wanted to see perspective from the call center, how terrified they were. Maybe they had people who had to leave the job because they were scared they were going to, get infected because they were working there. But apart from the call center, I think every other perspective that was shared, there was shared very, very, it was full, it was shared full with the full experience. I found the perspective of the Ebola virus very annoying and arrogant as always. For the researcher and that of the baobab tree, I really, really loved their perspective, because it just filled me with hope and just renewed my strength in people. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Omalola.
So I think for me, my Roman numeral reading is quite terrible, but I'll just describe her as the lone survivor, the daughter who was sent to live with her aunt. So it's one thing for a whole family to go, so there's no one left behind. You don't feel anything, but then you know that you're the only one. So I cried a little there, because I just can't imagine, knowing that your whole family is gone and it's just you left, and you've now even been rejected. That made me very, very emotional. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm here away from my family and I miss them, but I just can't imagine it. And so that tested me a bit, and I have to but yet, she bounced back on the other side of life, which speaks to human resilience, and sort of used her experience to, become to help others. So that chapter really, really affected me. And then I have to echo Bola's sentiment. When Ebola started talking, I said to myself, so Ebola too is talking in this book? Really? It was almost comical, and I shut the book and I'm like, no, Ebola is not having a laugh, having its day to shine. But then it also tells you that we're human. We don't, because we don't know, and you find it with these diseases, cancer, AIDS, we don't know. You're just moving blind, and the disease is probably, if given life, having these thoughts. You see the coronavirus reinventing itself every 7 market days. And so that was my, I'm like, Ebola cannot be speaking in this book. But then again, that's the stroke of genius with different perspectives in this, Veronique, that the trees, the bats, and the virus had their voice.
Yeah, thank you. It comes from oral traditions. You know, in oral traditions, everybody speaks. And I think we have forgotten about the genius of storytelling, traditional storytelling, and it just gives so much freedom to the storyteller. And you can, bring in poetry, political speech, all sorts of things. But animals do talk. And in fact, in many cultures, even Western cultures, the first stories had animals talking as well. But you see, we have forgotten all these things. But concerning, the moment the tree is speaking, the moment a bat is speaking, then why not Ebola? I couldn't, I had to give Ebola his own perspective. But so I found myself wondering if Ebola could speak, what would he say and how would it, would he be? Suddenly it became a character like any other character. I know it's a bit far-fetched, but it came from oral tradition, sincerely. So much happens. I mean, you have fantastic stories like My Life in the Bush, which comes from Nigeria, Tutola. Yes, Tutola, for example.
Tutola, yes.
It's incredible. Yeah, everybody speaks. I mean, the spirits speak, the genes speaks, everything in nature speaks. And that's the beauty also of such a vision, because it means that you somehow recognize that everything that lives on the earth has a right somewhere. These are living creatures. And you see, we go sometimes very far. We go all the way to space and think of aliens and invent aliens. How would aliens look like? What would they say? That's what we do all the time. When we are surrounded by creatures creatures that we don't acknowledge, and yet they share the earth with us. That's the paradox, viruses share the earth with us, and yet we can't see them, so we don't acknowledge them except when they attack us and we fall sick. So that's the paradox of the whole thing, and that's why I said, no, let me give a voice to Ebola.
Nice. You know which virus I'd like to have a chat with? The flu. I would like to have a chat with the flu, because that one is just like it's just silent, just there all the time. Attacks me once a month, and it's like, it's my favorite customer, so like, look at that. But yeah, that would be a nice virus to have a chat with. Okay, Ege, your hands up. After that, Aisha.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I think most of the chapters, honestly, I connected with most of them. But one that the one I want to talk about is the one with the nurse, where she was talking about how the health system in like African countries are bad. And that one I related to a lot because I'm a health worker in the lab. And most of the time, we actually don't have the necessary tools we need to work, even on a normal basis. Like we don't have gloves or anything. You're always managing. So talk less about during the period of like a pandemic. You are going to manage. A lot of times, some health workers will even put themselves at risk, even with all the protection, because they don't have enough. They are just managing. So yeah, that one, I honestly could really relate to it. Then the other, sorry.
No, I said it touched you.
Then the other one was, yes, it touched me. Actually, then I think after Amin mentioned it, the sanctuary workers, I would have actually liked to see their perspective for this Ebola virus, because even the not hospital workers now, but like normal sanctuary workers, you can tell from the way like they pack dirty, everything. They're not doing it, like they don't have proper protective equipment. They are just using their hands to pack it. You see some of them sitting in the trailer with no talk less about the ones in health sector. They are also not using like the proper methods. So it would have been really interesting, because I know those people would have been the first to go, number one, because they are not being properly protected and everything like that. And then I guess the final one was the one with the fiance, where he did not have, but he had to wait for his fiance, because that one took me back a bit, because during coronavirus, we also got corona in my family. Like my parents got, myself and my other siblings got, but our own wasn't so bad. We could still walk around. You will not even know that we had COVID, but we had to self-isolate at home. But my parents, because they were elderly, their case was really bad. So they sent them to the hospital. It was like the scariest 1 week of my life, because I legit did not think they'll make it out of it. So reading that particular chapter, it took me back a bit. But I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Aisha.
Yeah, actually my favorite part was Ebola's perspective.
Sorry,
I don't know why.
Aisha, pause first. This language of our favorite parts that we keep saying, this book is not exactly, there's nothing to favorite in this book.
I'm sorry.
Let's calm down with that
Without
favorite part. But so the perspective that
the
touched you
POV
the
I
most.
really like. No, it wasn't even the one that touched me the most. It was just the one that I thought was my favorite part. Firstly, because of the genius with which Veronique wrote it, the fact that she was able to picture what Ebola might have said, and also like following up on what Veronique said earlier, being able to like put political like discourse, like different things into the perspectives of inanimate objects, or like objects that don't speak the way that human beings speak. And I thought from perspective of Ebola, we also got to see how, even though people are the ones that go to stop like Ebola in the forest and stuff like that, most of these people are prompted because of like the political or social issues in their community. So if you remember from the beginning of the book, where two boys went into the forest and they had to kill the bats because they hadn't eaten that particular day. And then in different parts of the book as well, you could see how poverty and like classism and so many different things influence the way that people interact with, or are forced to interact with diseases like Ebola. And Ebola also noticed that and was speaking about it, like these people are forced to, like some of them are forced to, come and disturb me, aside from like all the big corporations that are coming to the forest and cut down the forest, like the trees. So I thought that was interesting, like Ebola also recognizing that okay, yeah, human beings come to destroy nature, sometimes, but sometimes people are forced to it because of all these other bigger corporations and issues like classism and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting, and that was what made that particular perspective my favorite. And also following up on what Ege said about like the nurses, the nurse perspective, I thought it was interesting because again, science can be wasteful because we are forced to be wasteful with science. So I'm also like an health. I have an health background, so the fact that for you to undo diseases like Ebola, for like viruses, Ebola, you need to be wasteful because that is the only way you can be safe. So you have to wear like all this like PPE and gloves and all of those things. And in turn, that wastefulness still affects nature in a way. So I just thought that paradox was interesting, that you had that perspective of how science can be wasteful because that's the only way we can protect ourselves, but also how that waste affects nature, if that makes sense. I didn't get to think about other perspectives I would have wanted to see, but I just thought the book was perfect in every way that the story was told. It evoked the right amount of emotion, evoked the right amount of hope, the right amount of tears, and all of these things. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I thought it was a brilliant book.
Okay.
I would like to just say that the bit about the health structure, the health systems being so weak, was the hardest chapter for me to write, because it just gripped me in the sense that I've been to public hospitals, and I know the kind of unhealthy conditions that sometimes a lot of the staff they don't have the equipment that they should have. And in the context of COVID-19, that when we did the translation, when we were working on the translation, and being in London, I could see the extreme contrast between, what is happening in Africa and what is happening in the Western world. And so, in that sense, what you're saying, Aisha, is right. There is, if you want to do medicine properly, there is some kind of waste coming to it. But I'm sure that you can find a balance. You don't have to have so much to use. You can also find a balance where you protect people who are trying to cure patients and at the same time achieve more. But sometimes I felt very bad writing these things about the weakness of the health structures. But at the end of the day, I wanted to point that out, and in the hope that we will never put ourselves in a position like that.
Wait, do I call you Benedict or Chere Chukwu? Chere Chukwu. I'm not pronouncing it.
Whichever one you think is better.
What did you say?
I said whichever one you prefer.
Oh, okay. I like Chere Chukwu. Okay.
Yeah,
you have the floor.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So I think the part of the book I related to the most, I want to use the term related to, was, the part about the health worker, the guy that was working in the isolation center. I'm someone that works in the health field. Well, I just recently started working in the health field. And during the coronavirus, I was still a student back then. We had to go for some kind of clinical posting. We had to go to the hospital. And we had to deal with patients. And I was scared because I'm putting myself, I kept asking myself, is it really worth it? I'm putting myself in the front line. I am dealing with this. And if anything happens to me, life goes on. Everything continues. So is it really worth it? Shouldn't I just, stop and face whatever happens? And it gets to me like when I was reading the book, I realized that if everybody kept saying, if all the health workers stopped working, if we all kept saying, if we all give in to our fear per se, because I felt one of the emotions I got from that particular part of the book was the fear. He was afraid. So I kept telling myself, if we all gave in to the fear, if we all went home to our loved ones, to stay with our loved ones, we would all die. Well, a lot of us would die. So someone had to do the hard work, and I chose that part, so I should face it till the end. So that part I related to it because it brought out all the emotions we get to feel in the health sector when we are in the health department. When we are faced with issues like this, we struggle with our emotions a lot. And it doesn't help that in most parts of Africa, the health system is very backward. Lack of tools to work with. It discourages even the most zealous of people. And then another part I also kind of related to was, when other characters that we are not humans, we are, talking their points of view. I once had a discussion with a friend who told me that, the humans are we cause most of the things that happen to us because we are very selfish. We look at ourselves and we call ourselves like the most important creatures. But it takes something as small, something microscopic to put us in our place, to tell us that, So I think when those characters, what I was reading from the point of view of the barb tree, of Ebola, and I was like, humans, like, we should be more considerate, we should be more careful with the way we interact with nature, not just for nature's sake, but for our sake too. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Dija. I like Dija. How do I pronounce the name? Your mute is
Hadija.
yeah. Hadija.
Hi,
Look at that.
Hadija. Hi,
Oh,
everybody.
You funkified your name.
I know.
Hi,
I know.
Hadija.
It's for those people, you know them. You all
Okay.
can call me Hadija. Thank you,
Okay.
Amin, for this platform, and thank you to our author Veronique Tadjo for joining us. For me, two things stood out. The first one that touched me the most was how the people affected, our brothers and sisters in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and other parts of West Africa, how they had to disregard their burial rituals, how the people who died just had to be discarded like that. That touched me. I couldn't stop thinking about that. Because as Africans, we hold death so close to us. I think maybe just after birth. I think death might be even more as a bigger ritual than even birth. And so for the people who passed away in such huge numbers, to be piled up on corpses, to be piled on each other, and that just touched me in such a raw way. And of course, it speaks to the brilliance of our author, how she was able to evoke that emotion in us. That really, I couldn't stop thinking about that, because death is final. Death is the end. There's no more. I couldn't stop thinking about that. The other thing that stuck with me and I couldn't stop thinking about was, because this was in 2014, around about. So when Corona came around in 2019, 2020, what I couldn't stop thinking about was how re-traumatized the people who were affected by Ebola felt. All of a sudden now, this is another disaster. This is another epidemic. It's a pandemic now. All this, the news. Just, it was a lot. It was a lot. And yes, thank you, Veronique Tadjo, for such an important book. And what the author mentioned as well, translating this book, and you see things that are so the temperature checks and the gloves and the PPE and all of this stuff that was so reminiscent of COVID, but the author not conflating the two pandemics, not mixing up COVID and Ebola, and making sure that this is an Ebola story and not a COVID story. I really appreciated that, and thank you for Veronique for that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you to Dija and also Anukam for your remarks. I mean, it helps me to kind of continue to think about what I have written and how I have written it. Yeah, I think the health system again, if I come back to it, was really a big blow, and also the fact that we felt so powerless. It's like a lot of people must have felt like they were on their own, and that's they needed to take care of themselves if they wanted to survive. And I thought that it must have been so hard to feel that you were on your own on this, and yet the solidarity did happen, and there is no doubt that if so many people had not come to help, and we would still be in a bad place. But I take also your remark about re-traumatizing the fact that COVID coming on top of such an event that is not completely over, as a matter of fact, because we see that you have luckily smaller epidemics, Ebola epidemics, happening in different countries. Recently, if I'm not mistaken, in Tanzania, for example. So the virus is still around, and the idea was also to learn something. That's why I tried to have a balance between fiction and facts, because I was totally determined to bring in some facts, because what I learned was so important for me that I wanted to kind of pass it on as well. And in the hope that if people are interested, they will go and research even more and have even more information about what happened. So that was the idea. But the burial rites also, that was really difficult. And in fact, it is tied to the traditional religion, traditional spirituality. And in the fight against Ebola, the scientists had to admit at some point that they need to be closer to the people and closer to what people feel about death, for example. And they had to come to some compromises where people could be there when they buried their dead, but it was surrounded by kind of sanitize the environment and things that you could not do. But they understood that if they did not cooperate, they would not be able to fight the disease. So it's interesting to see how science itself, science on its own, cannot do it. We are human beings, as you said, and so we have to respect our traditions.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Nikki. Nikki Alko.
Hey, yes, okay, amazing. Thank you so much. And I wonder if, I'm going to say this as a comment or a question, but what's really interesting through the book is that I think, Veronique, you avoid taking on the voice of someone who passes away from Ebola. We don't get that perspective of someone actually following through into passing from it. And I think it's a hard place to inhabit, right? Because it's a perspective that cannot be fully understood until you're in that space. But I obviously, that from people who cared for them, there would have been stories of people's last moments and people who spent time with them. So I think it was interesting not to have that, but also to see if we could then connect that voice back into nature in some way, like with the baobab trees and the Ebola virus, what's on the other side of the passing, because of these cultural ties we have to death and how we see death culturally. So I guess my question is, what was, in thinking about telling this story, was there a conscious choice to avoid writing about someone passing over into death? And yeah, why did you step away from doing that and putting together something that was both a mixture of fiction and fact?
Yes, I can answer that one. The closest that I come to doing that is when the sprayer, you remember, is confronted with someone with a girl who doesn't want to let him pass. I think that's the closest I come to talking about the dead. But it's true that I didn't make a dead person speak because I thought it was such about the living. Important thing was to talk about how people survive faced with such a challenge. You know, their life is in danger. They could die any moment. You know, if they fight against the disease can kill them. If they don't do anything, you know, they feel like they're completely powerless. So for me, it was very much a story about the living, confronted by death. And as I said, the closest I come to a dead person intervening is that girl who doesn't want to leave the sprayer, the guy who tries to do a burial. And in fact, it's interesting to see that that young man manages to appease the dead woman, you know, because he says, you know, we're doing that for you. We're not, he kind of negotiates with her, but without speaking, because you're not exchanging words when you're talking to dead people. So it's all in the mind. So he's trying to say, but why would she be angry? We're doing that for them as well.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think the reason I'm thinking through about this is because as a story about survival, it's about this idea of, do humans, do we learn from tragedy, and how much do we rely on sorts of how am I going to say, like, ancestral guides, but what is it about, like, our legacies that that help us into survival, and could the people who have passed be part of you know, reshaping our language for, you know, rebuilding community in a sense. I don't know what that means and how literature can address that, but I thought it was really interesting to see that you chose not to approach that voice. But thank you for that.
I would just like to add that for me, when writing the book, I was thinking, look, we had this huge trauma, this catastrophe, but in fact, a catastrophe only remains a catastrophe if you don't do the changes afterwards. That means if you don't learn from what you've been through and then decide, okay, I'll do it differently nowadays. You know, you understand, it's about changing. It's about understanding certain things, you know, and then saying, okay, maybe I can change the way I do things, and so that I don't find myself in the same situation. That was the idea. A catastrophe is an opportunity to change, and it will always stay. It will always stay a catastrophe if you don't change afterwards, if you keep doing the same mistakes. So that was also the idea behind the book.
Thank you, Veronique. Christine?
I think a lot of what I wanted to say has been said, but one thing that I was thinking of is just the effect of poverty, which I think was a little bit mentioned, and about how much has been taken from all over the African continent by people outside of Africa, which has led to a lot of the poverty. As born and raised in the US, I do think about, like, the impact of some of my ancestors from the European side and throughout Europe, who has really plundered, and about those two boys who did have to go and get the bats. And it was really tragic to me. They were so excited, and then this horrible thing happened. And that really, like, broke my heart, thinking about that. And then with the hospitals, about how they're so, sorry, I'm getting emotional, but how understaffed they were, and the lack of supplies, and how really abandoned, I feel like, until, you know, it affects other people, how so many people are forgotten about. And yet, despite that, the adaptations that people made to get through it and to survive.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yes, it was, yeah, the fact that I started the story with those two boys, I must specify that it wasn't because they couldn't eat. It was just because they were boys. And a lot of boys just like to go hunting and just do all sorts of things, catch little animals. So I think for me that made it even worse because they were just playing. They were just wanting, which is I don't think that is a good thing to kill bats when you're playing, but I'm saying that's what people do in villages when you're in an environment like that. You do that. So it's even worse because they're innocent kids that didn't know the consequences of their actions. So it's also about saying that a virus doesn't choose. I mean, you can be young or old, you can be a kid, or you can be an older person, you can be rich or poor. There's no logic to it. You know, it just happens. And then you're left with your body, and it's your body that will make the difference. If you have a good immunity, then you will survive the virus. If you don't, you won't survive the virus. But I understand what you're saying about that that relation between the West and the South is what has happened. I didn't want to start everything about the history of the encounter between the West and the South. I thought that today we know enough to start the story from today. And I think the way your reaction shows that you filled in the gap in a sense because you know the background to the story. But for me, the fact that the contrast is so huge between like the Western health systems and most of the African health systems speaks a lot to the history of this encounter between the North and the South. And yeah, we really need to work at it together so that we have more solidarity, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Hilda?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Veronique, for joining us. I think one of the things that I was saying about when reading the book was how the political situation in these countries also affected how people dealt or responded to Ebola. I'm from Uganda, which we've had one president for like almost 40 years now. So naturally, I think about how most of us distrust our government and how that has impacted how we deal with epidemics. We had the HIV epidemic many years ago, and then coronavirus recently, and now Ebola. And I think I see the difference between, I think with the HIV epidemic, it was like, we had a new government that people kind of trusted. And when like, you know, like when medication came, people were like very like willing to like listen and all of that. With the coronavirus, it was like, the government is lying. They are trying to kill us. And like many Ugandans to this day don't believe that coronavirus was real. And like now with Ebola, we are seeing some of the same thing. Like my mom being like, no, he's making this up. The president is making this up. And like how that impacts how people don't actually care and how they end up really, really like suffering in like real ways because of this. I saw this coming up in the book with like the health workers and how they're talking about how, you know, it kept deteriorating and money is getting stolen and all of that. So I really appreciated that. And another thing that the book brought up for me was the part about the child who was impacted by, like, who was orphaned as a result of the Ebola epidemic, and like how those children are dealing. That was just a really, really soft spot for me. I know like a lot of Ugandans were impacted by the HIV epidemic many years ago. And I think in the 90s was the time when a lot of children like were really either born orphan because their parents died before they were born, or like a lot of those children to this day. And it's like, it was just so helpful to see this book just talk about the psychological trauma that brings, and how literally it's a lot more just like deeper than just, oh, the parents died and then they went into this home. So I felt like, yeah, I felt like a lot of us had seen like that. Thank you, Veronica.
Can I just say that, yeah, the issue of disinformation is a very political issue as well, is because when there is a health crisis, we're faced with with our governments. So, you know, they have our lives in their hands, and so it becomes extremely political, and they know that they can be challenged any time, you know, if they can't deal with the situation. So it's a highly political subject, and that's why it's important to give facts. Because I think that a lot of people, when they distrust their government, then they distrust what the governments are saying to them, which is a very dangerous situation. So it's very good to inform yourself, to get as much information as you can on your own. And then if you can, you know, pass it on, that's good. But it's important also to be able to see for yourself what the consequences are. And yes, I think it's highly political, and yeah, it's a shame we don't put things together. Because I mean, very often we think that other subjects are highly political, like elections or this or that, and we don't realize that health is the most political subject, because it's literally about life and death. So if we challenge our governments more on that subject, we would probably have better hospitals.
Sure, this is true. Jesus, I was just about to say something. Okay, another perspective I just remember that I would love to hear from is those bloody politicians or the people who were collecting the aid. Those people. In fact, I think their sides would have been more sassy than Ebola virus. In my head, that's how they would have sounded, because obviously they're enjoying the fruits of their labor. Because if they are getting money for all these things and it's not trickling down to the hospitals, who are the miscreants? Who are the miscreants that were handling this money? It pains me so much, the amount of aid that trickles in during these kind of situations on the continent, and it just disappears. Like someone's girlfriend needs to fly first class or something, or they need to do a new house. It boggles my mind, but it pisses me off so much. So that would have been a nice perspective. So I'm adding that to my list of perspective. To my fantasy perspective list. Okay, so I have one more question that I want to ask before I throw it out to everyone's final question for the author. Veronique, I read somewhere that you didn't set out to write a book about the epidemic, but it was after it was contained and you noticed the whole the silence around the whole epidemic from the press generally. Like, it just went quiet as if nothing happened. Everybody's trying to forget. Well, except TV shows in the States where there's a patient who just, oh, this guy has Ebola, and all of a sudden they're containing it. That I rarely saw anything about the Ebola virus again. Why? Okay, this is to Veronique and like to the rest of the members in the house. Why do we think as humans we like to hush things over when they passed, because this is not just virus, it's even wars. Like in Nigeria, the Biafran War, they don't even teach us that in schools. Last year, 2 years ago, we read The Mountain Sings, and we saw how America did madness in Vietnam with the orange, what was that orange thing? The orange, that bomb that they exploded in Vietnam, and people are now sick till date. Well, why do we think but till now, even the Vietnamese government is like, oh, nothing really happened. Agent Orange, thank you. Nothing really happened. Why do we think as humans we just like to hush, like keep quiet over this kind of big, and they're not small, big things?
Yeah. Well, yes. First, the corruption, if you want, during the Ebola epidemic. In a way, it's about nature, human nature. There are always people that would take advantage of despair. If they see that the situation is chaotic, there is money to be made. So in this sense, you kind of have to shut down your emotions at some point and look at what is happening in a very, very cold manner, because you have to have accountability. If you don't have accountability in a particular period, for example, for Ebola epidemic, you won't have accountability during coronavirus or the next one, and even in the US, we're seeing it now. For example, in the UK, there's a lot of talk about how the money was spent during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. People are looking at it now closely in terms of, where did the money go? Why did people, buy so much PPE, and then we didn't see blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of things that will come up, and we'll understand how people can abuse a situation when there is a crisis. So that's something we need to learn and be more careful about. Then the silence, yes, it's again human nature. It's just that when we have something very traumatic, we can't wait to, erase it, because we want so much to continue living our ordinary lives, that, everybody on every side wants to just wipe it out, put it under the carpet, which is, a bit sad, because then things happen again, and then you're faced with the same situation and you have not learned enough from what has happened before. So you keep repeating the same things. So that's why sometimes you have to be the messenger of bad news. It's not an easy situation to be in, but you try to, as writers, for example, and artists, you try to find a way to tell the story, but putting the human dimension first, and try to cut out all the rest. But yes, that's one of the challenges. I was really shocked by the silence that followed Ebola, the big one, the 2014 one. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to throw it out to the house now. Can follow up on that, or you can ask any other questions you have, any lingering questions you might have, or when they say, if you could ask the author anything, what would you ask? So you have the floor. Omolola, your hands up.
Yeah, so my hand had been up when you were talking about the politicians.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying why, I'm going to make the comment that I made. So when Ebola came to Nigeria, I was working for the Lagos state government. My mother was consulting for the Ministry of Health. Fashola was our governor, and Jide Idris was the commissioner. They saw in that time that because of the corruption, they themselves being corrupt, that this sort of, I don't want to call it a pandemic because it wasn't a pandemic at that time, but this disease, if it were to take hold in Lagos State, we would not survive it because of what Lagos State is. And they decided that they would disperse the funds. I guess conscience kicked in from their fear then, that they know what's going on in other parts of West Africa, Lagos, the mega city, would not survive it if money was not directed where it should be. I don't know how they handled coronavirus or whatever, but that was the thought then. But inherently, again, besides public health systems, when it comes to money and public officials, and I'll speak from my experience, we're inherently corrupt. And I did work in the development aid space. So, and because that was my beat while I worked for Lagos State, and development aid workers are as corrupt as the countries they're dealing with. I'll just put that out there. So the UNICEFs, the World Banks, the whosoever's, they are as corrupt as the government officials, the private agencies they are dealing with. So I'll just, put that out there. I'm not saying that no one is to blame or one person is to blame, but this is what happens when you're dealing, and as Veronique has pointed out, even the UK is looking into how monies were spent. When it comes to money and free money, there's corruption because the aid agencies need the African countries to, for their budget to perform. They're not allowed to send money back to the center. So they do all these things so that they can have all these programs that don't benefit the people on the ground, but they've thought up these policies, these programs, these things that they're going to do, and they call it help or they call it aid. So that, let me park, that to one side. As far as silence is there's always stigma when it comes to disease. Even today, people never want to tell you when a family member has cancer. Cancer is not contagious. At least we don't know that it's contagious, but there's always like a blight on a family once there's been a terminal disease or may run in the family. And yes, we do find out that there's some cancers that may be hereditary. So they don't want to associate with that family. Heaven forbid it be something like AIDS. Oh, wow. Then you become like a leper. You might as well go to a leper colony. So we're very, no matter, even if you have a limp, people don't want their son to marry or daughter to marry you because you have some sort of disability. They other you once you're just not perfect. And I think that again is human bias. We are very prejudiced people. We may not know it. I have my prejudices. We all have our prejudices. But when it comes to disease, it's even more. So definitely if something is going on in my family and I think it's going to affect everybody else's reputation, you just want to be quiet. You don't want anybody to know. And I think even nations, you see how, and excuse me, please correct me if I'm wrong, how even China handled the beginning of the coronavirus, allegedly. They didn't want it to get out, or we didn't know how serious it was until it started to get out. So that, it just comes to human prejudice and examples that have been made of people. And so when you see that, you also don't want to, And I don't have any questions for Veronique. I think everyone here has been very, very intelligent and enlightening with their questions, but just to say to her, thank you so much. This powerful little book has given us so much to talk about.
Just want to say thank you very much, Omolola. These are very, very strong remarks, and I'm so happy you have told us what you've just told us, because it fits in well with what I had in my mind when I was writing the book. I think we need to continue to understand how we behave in situations of crisis and learn from it. That's my obsession, is we need to learn and also to make our governments accountable to what happens. But I want to say that it's fantastic to have been talking to you. I really, I'm sorry my video wasn't working, but I could see you, so it was a delight to to see you all. And I really liked this conversation. I think it was really at a very high level, and it has given me quite a lot to think about.
Thank you, Veronique. I was thinking too about like the silence and like the just moving on and trying to brush everything kind of under the rug, and about how we are all just like pushed to always be performing. I think many of us live in capitalistic systems, and even if we don't, the world as a whole seems to run on this now, which is treats everything and everyone as like something to be consumed. So we don't have the time to sit and pause and think. I think it goes back to what you said, Veronique, about everyone having a voice and how so many of us don't have a voice around the world and in our communities, and we're forced to just work, move on. And I think you don't get to process that trauma. And when you don't get to process the trauma, it just repeats itself or it shows up in different ways. And it is hard. Like I think we probably all have gone through, obviously, COVID, but, individual challenges too. And it definitely, like in my personal life, I found it helpful to be able to find community to talk about some things. Like on an individual level, I experienced infertility for many years, and it's been really hard. And for a long time, people would kind of hide that and not talk about it. But I have found on an individual level, being honest about it has been really helpful and healing for me, even going through something really difficult. And so, but there's other things that are more stigmatized that I haven't, and I can see how it's a challenge. So I don't know, I think like if we were able to slow down and realize that we're part of nature, all of the things that your book is talking about, I think that we could learn, we could reflect, we could find better ways, but we're all just being treated like objects to be harnessed and used to move the capitalism along.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think yes. We are faced with a very, very strong system, and so we need to look at it and see how we can somehow change the course so that we can save our planet. And I think that epidemics and pandemics are part of all these. People very often talk about climate change, about global warming, but they don't want to put the health in with it, because then it will be too much. People will just simply see the extent of the crisis we are faced with. And there is no doubt that the climate change influences what happens in nature, which in turn influences the health of animals and human beings. So it's all interconnected, but a lot of people want to divide issues so that we don't see exactly how bad it is. So we have a big challenge in front of us, and we just have to. We as they say, there is only one Earth, so we have to fight for it. And while we're fighting for it, we can understand also that we're fighting for ourselves. And the health issue is one of the big ones.
Bawa-allah.
Okay, as we round up, I just wanted to mention one quick thing and then ask a quick question of the author. So I think in Africa especially, religion plays a very strong part, and can be very religious people can be very self-righteous. And this brings me to the part of the priest, someone whose brother was a big priest, and or his brother was telling him that his priest said that Ebola is evil incarnate. It's come to punish you for your sins. Those who have stopped following God's word will perish, and the rest will have nothing to fear. And I just thought, second to human beings feeling that they're higher than nature, this is the other thing we have that's very strong in Africa, at least I know it is in Nigeria, where religious people just have this self-righteousness and feel that they're bigger than everybody else and everything. So it was important that was mentioned in the book. It wasn't a surprise to me, because I think every time we talk about things like this and we dig deep, especially Nigeria, Africa, you see a very strong part that religion plays. But when Ebola came and COVID, you could see that it was a leveler. Even, it would have been interesting to see what happened to this same priest that said this thing later, but I'll just leave that. And my quick question to Veronique, again, thank you again for coming, is when you were writing this, which of the points of views could you relate with the most, or which one was the most difficult? Either question, which one was the most difficult to write, or which one could you relate with the most?
Yeah, there were two characters. The nurse, I was very close to the nurse, because I've got friends who are doctors and who are in the health system, and I really felt for the nurse, because she even went abroad, she did some studies, she was full of hopes, and then she comes back, and then she starts bit by bit to see that things are not what she was expecting, and then she starts to compromise, to accept a level of mediocrity, and then she because what I liked about that character is that she was very conscious. Her mind was clear, but she was faced with a system that she couldn't beat. And I thought that was quite something. And of course, the other character is the mother, because that's where the spirituality comes, but it's also the idea that when you're a mother and you lose your children, I don't know what worst can happen. And yet, they tried. And so at the end, she feels defeated, and that her love was not able to protect her children. And I thought that was very hard to write as well.
Sorry, Blessing, before you go, I was watching a movie. Why the mother's part really affected me was, as at the time when I was reading that particular POV, I was also watching a K-drama, birth care center, and there was someone said that, what is the cure to a child's belly ache? And it wasn't drugs, it wasn't take the child to the hospital, it was a mother's belly rub. And I was just reading that part, I was like, oh dear, this woman is like, if everything that I am as a person that I have become now, because like when you become a mother, it takes over the entire personality. It's like, if everything I am right now cannot save my child, like, why am I here? What is the point? So that part really touched me. Okay, Blessing, our new mommy. Blessing.
Sorry, I'm here. I was trying to unmute myself. I actually raised my hand to answer the question about the silence. So, but every other person that has gone before me has said part of what I wanted to say. So I will just save us all the time and say the one that they did not say that I wanted to say. So there are two things. I feel like when tragedy, or like, it's tragic, so it's tragedy. When tragedy strikes, I don't think that on an individual level that we really forget. It's just like Christine said, there's so much going on in life that, I don't know, I think people are just trying to keep up with living and catch up with what's happening. That sometimes they forget to talk about the things that happened in the past, but they just carry it as part of them. And it's also linked to the second reason that I think that sometimes I don't know whether I would say forgetting or keeping quiet is like a survival mechanism for some people. Like during the war, things that people have experienced, they just lock it up somewhere in their minds, because if they really allow themselves to feel, or if we allow ourselves to feel, we may not be able to move on. So I think that's it, because like, for example, during the wars you talked about, and even Ebola, like while I was reading this book, all these perspectives that Veronique talked about, I was like, all these things could have been like, we could have known people that experienced these things in Nigeria, if not because of the sacrifice of Dr. Adadevo and the people that halted this thing from the start before it spread. So you can only imagine like people in the communities where these things affected, people who lost loved ones. There's no way they would forget. It's not possible. But I think on, like say, on a larger scale, like with the press and all of that, I mean, even yesterday's news is like old news to compare what's happening today. By next week, what happened this week is already like past people. And the more you keep talking about it, the more people even get like desensitized. Like for instance, during this Boko Haram, the Chibok girls, at some point, people now started making up stories like it's not true. Why are we always talking about these people? People say things like that, like as if it's not human beings that we're missing, people's children that we're missing. And you get things like that all the time, all of the time. So that's just a little contribution that I wanted to make. And I also say that, Veronique, your book was really, really, really good. I didn't expect it, but you moved me a lot. So thank you for writing it. And thank you, Amin, for picking the book. Let me tell you now, because I said at the beginning that I wasn't sure why you picked the book. So now I know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Blessing. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions. If anybody has any final words, you can share now. If not, we should be rounding up. Are we good? Are we okay? You can just shake your head. Those of you that the camera is on. Okay, all right. So thank you very much, Veronique, for joining us. Oh, wow. You just had to put your hand up now. Aisha, you have the floor.
Sorry. Sorry. I just wanted to make a comment. I think Veronique is a brilliant person, like not just a brilliant writer. From this conversation, it's quite obvious that she's very smart, brilliant. And it would be nice to spend like a whole day with her. That's just what I'm thinking. But yeah, I just wanted to say that.
With pleasure.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Veronique, for joining us for this book chat. And thank you guys also for tuning in, as always. Did I just say tune in? For joining the wow. Sorry, I'm preparing for my role in the TV show in the future. But thank you guys for joining the book club, as always. You can unmute your camera, your mics now to say thank you to Veronique, and we can just, like take pictures.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
very much,
Thank
Veronique.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, as well. The conversation has been so good.
Yes, it was great.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much, really. You're a great group, and thank you to Amin. Wow, I don't know how you do it. Bravo, bravo.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
All right. Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Bukola,
Keep
please
well.
use style and take a picture.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Veronique.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Is everyone ready? Bye. Give me a minute. Are we ready? Yep.
Yes, I'm ready.
Done. Yeah.
All right. God will honor you. All right, y'all.
Hi, everyone.
This was great, everyone.
It was
Bye.
lovely. I really enjoyed
Bye.
it.
Shall meet in the
Bye,
book chat.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.